Welcome to the second episode of Conversations with Jeff. First of all, I want to thank you guys for all your text messages, DMs, and emails I've gotten. And based on your feedback, we're going to start having conversations twice a month and continue providing with great content. But specifically with this episode, I really want to talk about something that's really relevant as we embark on, Shawn will tell you, the busiest time in the real estate market, the spring market. And this is a great way for both buyers and sellers to save money on their closing costs. And who doesn't want to save money? You can save on your transfer tax, and that's what Purchase Cema allows you to do. And I will tell you, about 65% of the agents aren't familiar with how this works. So Shawn Carson is with Citibank. Citibank is one of the banks that offers Purchase Cema.
Absolutely.
And Shawn has done a bunch of them. In fact, he's closed upwards of $600 million in both, I want to say, commercial and residential real estate.
Correct.
So he's a great source of information, and we'll talk to him, and we're going to dive into Purchase Cema and how it's going to save you some money. Thanks for joining me, Shawn.
Thanks for having me.
So Shawn, let's jump right into it.
Okay.
2 questions for you. Number one, how are both buyers and sellers able to save money on their closing costs using Purchase Cema? And secondly, what's the criteria that's needed?
Jeff, as you know, there's very rarely a win-win situation in real estate. There's always a lot of contention at the closing table. In this case, this is where buyers and sellers can both benefit in a transaction. So a Purchase Cema, well, let's start with a Cema, what it stands for. It stands for Consolidation, Extension, Modification Agreement, or Cema. Okay. And basically, for all intents and purposes, a buyer is assuming the remainder of the seller's mortgage.
Okay. They're
also taking out a new mortgage for the difference between the mortgage being assumed and the actual amount being financed. So let's just say that the seller has an existing mortgage of $500,000.
Okay.
Purchaser is buying the seller's property for $1 million. They're going to put 20% down, so they're going to finance $800,000. Okay. So a Purchase Cema would allow for the buyer to assume the $500,000 of the existing mortgage, take a new mortgage for $300,000 for $800,000, consolidate the two mortgages together, and pay mortgage tax only on the difference between the existing mortgage of $500,000 and the new $300,000 in debt that's being added to the transaction. That could save the buyer upwards of $10,000, $20,000 on the transaction, depending on how high the sales price is.
Okay, so let me make sure, because I know there are going to be some people watching here that are a little bit uncertain exactly how that works. Okay. So once the buyer takes the assignment of the seller's mortgage,
that's correct.
The bank sees that as new additional money.
That's correct.
So if the existing mortgage was $1 million, you now take the $500,000 as you mentioned. That leaves you with remaining $500,000.
Correct.
So now you're only paying transfer tax on that $500,000. So that's the saving.
Absolutely.
Okay. And now conversely, the seller, they're saving money because the mortgage that the buyer is taking over, they now have less amount left on their mortgage. So Shawn, we talked about how buyers save money.
Right.
So explain to me how sellers save money in this process.
The seller saves money because they're realizing savings on the transfer taxes, meaning the taxes they're paying on the sales price of their property. So because they're giving the buyer a Purchase Cema, the recorded sales price is actually going to be $500,000 as opposed to $1 million, which is what the sales price was in the example that we gave.
Okay.
So they're paying transfer taxes of $4 per thousand on $500,000 as opposed to $4 per thousand on $1 million.
Gotcha.
So in other words, their transfer taxes, instead of being $4,000, are going to be $2,000. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if they're moving and they want to save some money in new furniture or whatever, you know, any amount is a good amount that can be presented and make you look like a hero as the agent because you're showing the seller how to save some money as well.
So now we know how both buyers and sellers save money in this process. So do the savings have to be equally split among both buyer and seller, or can it be negotiated?
Everything's a negotiating point. I mean, because of the fact that the seller is also realizing some savings and the buyer's realizing some savings, usually it's not a negotiated split, but, you know, I've seen cases where, you know, the seller's like, hey, you know, I'm saving you some money. What can we do in terms of some of the credits we had to give or what have you? But I'll give you a sweet spot, particularly as a real estate agent, where you really can provide some value to your developer partners, okay, which is developers can also save money on a Purchase Cema by basically negotiating with the buyer that they'll allow them to do a Cema even though there's no existing mortgage, so the buyer's not saving money, but the seller's saving money on transfer taxes. So I've seen it's common in real estate contracts on new construction that the buyer is actually paying the seller's transfer taxes.
Right.
So with doing a purchase Cema, that eliminates that, which saves the buyer some money on one end and allows the developer to recoup some money because, as you know, on development financing, they're paying a mortgage tax on that whole freight. So there's a way, to provide value to your developer partners and show that you're an expert in the field.
Okay, that makes sense. That's something good to know. All right, so Shawn, let's talk a little bit about your business.
Okay.
Have you used Cema often in the last year or so?
In 2017, I did use Cema on about 12 transactions, actually.
Okay, and has that been a great tool to really save deals that are about to fall apart?
It's been an excellent tool to save deals, particularly in areas or in transactions where money is tight.
Okay.
Buyer may have a lot of money tied up in an annuity or into some type of pledged asset where they don't want to, withdraw funds because of penalty, or they don't want to, request a gift, which means we'd have to send it back into the underwriter. So we have used the Purchase Cema in order to offset, some of those costs, for a buyer where they may have been $4,000 or $5,000 short on a transaction, and now, bingo, we're ready to close.
Gotcha. Now, last question. In this case, in the Cema case scenario, does the buyer typically incur any additional probably costs when it comes to attorney fees, since there's maybe more paperwork involved in the process?
Great question. No, buyer does not incur any additional fees. Typically, the bank attorney does all the legwork in terms of coordinating with both parties to speak to the seller's bank to first set up getting the Cema, and then to speak to the purchaser's bank to let them know that we're doing a Purchase Cema, and to file all the necessary paperwork. Generally, it's seamless. No one ever sees it.
So it doesn't prolong the closing process?
Doesn't prolong the closing process at all. As a matter of fact, as long as it's negotiated early on in the process, it is completely seamless. It does not stop the process one bit.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right.